Slightly different video today, guys, and I've been racking my brain on how to go about this. I don't want to just show the article or anything like that. I want to read it out and discuss it, right? So I'm going to do it a bit like a podcast format. Bloody Disgusting had an interview with Peter Briggs about an unmade Hellraiser script. This was actually one which I'm not familiar with, and that's funny because, of course, I have most of the unmade Hellraiser scripts. I'm one of the only ones that has, revealed exactly what Clive Barker had for his Hellraiser remake script. I've got quite a lot of them, but this is one which I was not aware of at all. So this is a surprise. This is a bit of a shock. So they had an interview with him, discussed it all, and I want to go through and talk about it, basically. I'll leave a link to the article on Bloody Disgusting down below in the description box, and kudos to them for getting it, because that's really cool. It's really, really cool. So this is Peter Briggs' unmade Hellraiser sequel called Hellraiser Lament. I'm not overly sure what I think about it yet, but we're going to go through, discuss it, and then talk about it together. So this is in Bloody Disgusting's Phantom Limbs featurette on their sort of, their website. So they speak and try to get a well-rounded view of unmade things. Now this is Hellraiser Lament, a project that was actually intended to be the 7th entry in the long-running franchise that sadly never made it past the treatment stage. Now, it was named for both the puzzle box at the heart of the series and a town that would have served as the sequel's primary location. Lament would have displayed a much larger scope than the last two films in the series, which have been relegated to DTV releases, direct-to-TV, or direct-to-video, after 1996's Hellraiser Bloodline. In addition to introducing a new cast of heroes populating Lament, the film would have brought back Pinhead alongside a few fan favourites from prior entries in the series and the story, and a story that culminates with the nearly apocalyptic destruction of the titular town. So, Peter Briggs came out. This is the writer, of course, writer of such epic things like Alien vs Predator. Fucking blah. And he was asked, he revealed this. They approached me for the Hellraiser project because of Freddy vs. Jason, which he was actually involved in when it was in development hell. As with any movie industry project, being in the right place at the right time helped. I guess somebody at Miramax remembered that and said, what about Peter Briggs on this? Which is always nice. Miramax gave no parameters, so it was an open field. I came up with the take and gave it to them. It got really confusing because both projects, Mr. Briggs also worked for 18 months on a Highlander project for them. That's what that's referencing. Both projects were just about the time that Miramax Dimension was sold by Disney, and all of the rights to the various properties Miramax owned ended up fragmented everywhere. As I recall, I kind of finished on both projects roughly the same time, and it was ultimately a wasted effort because the studio itself was actually dead. Sold. Bye-bye. I always seem to be in the right place to have something done and then something horrible happens, like a producer dies or a movie studio goes bankrupt or the entire studio development slate goes into turnaround for whatever reason, which has happened to me on far too many projects. That happened to me on Alien vs Predator, that happened to me on Forever Man, that I did for Paramount with Stan Lee, Robert Evans, and it happened to me here on both of these projects at Dimension. But really, in the case of Hellraiser, there was no script, it was just the initial 10 to 15 page treatment. So this is what the story is, right? So that's the sort of background, that's why it never came to be. And here's the story, ladies and gents. So dated June 2002 and noted as being slated as the 7th installment of the Hellraiser franchise, the treatment carries not only the title Hellraiser Lament, but also the potential alternates Hellraiser Jihad, Hellraiser Nemesis, and Hellraiser The New Order. So a whole list of potentials. The listed aims for the project in the opening paragraph note that it's meant to be a chronological extension to the first 4 films, foregoing the standalone approach of the last 2 direct-to-video entries, Inferno and Hellseeker, simultaneously furthering and enriching the original Barkerverse mythos, and using the opportunity to tie up some of the pre-5 continuity flaws, including the futuristic ending of Bloodline. Briggs begins. It started off with a prologue. Pinhead and his other core Cenobite members, Orders of the Gash, they'd been imprisoned by the rhomboid god Leviathan, which you saw in Hellbound Hellraiser 2, within the schism, which is this otherworldly dimensional limbo of blackness, for their overzealous doctrines of pain and order. Not overly sure whether I like that. Why would they be imprisoned when Leviathan, is all about order and pain and suffering? But anyway, he continues and says, it began with a flashback prelude in 1750s America. You had the Duc de Lisle, who is the commissioner of the main configuration boxes from Philippe Le Marchand in France, who we saw in Hellraiser Bloodline. He leads a ragtag team of prospectors into a fissure rift in the remote parts of the Appalachian Mountains, containing ore veins of silver and gold. We learn that de Lisle is wholly financing the construction and funding of a mining community on this site in the hope that it will be one day a prosperous town. He is specifically only interested in mining this kind of strange burnished metal that none of the other miners know that somewhat resembles copper. Now, this is discovered eventually to be a shard of Leviathan, apparently. Now, once it's mined and exported, it forms the metallic components and the puzzle boxes. So this town is basically built on a splintered chunk of Leviathan, this town Lament. Now from here, Briggs' treatment cuts to present-day America. There's this all-American pie town named Lament that's sprung up on the location because the mining's gone. It's slowly starting to atrophy, so you can sort of see the wear and tear at the edges of things. The local youth are disaffected and slightly desperate. It's a bit of a dead end for a teenager. The local movie theatre is 30 miles away. They don't warm to outsiders so far, so movie cliche. It's here that the treatment notes that the introductions to the kids in Lament will be similar in fashion to those in the third and fourth Nightmare on Elm Street films, revealing along the way that the key victims' ancestors were Lament's founding fathers, the prospectors from Duc de Lisle's mining operation. The protagonist was a girl called Jodie Creeley, the daughter of a sanitation worker who's recently moved to Lament. She's having a hard time fitting in at school, and she works at the local library. There's a geometry teacher named Gardner who's checking out books related to the town's history. He's distracted, a bit of a cold fish. We're then introduced to the other teenagers in rapid succession. The second protagonist is a kid called Vin Vinson, terrible bloody name, who slings hash at the local town diner. And there's a girl called Tamsin Hartinger, who is the mousy daughter of the town's chief of police and Jodie's only real friend in Lament. She's acting progressively weirder and more withdrawn, and Jodie's concerned for her. Tamsin basically just doesn't want to go into what's troubling her, and they have an argument in this diner. She walks out. Very cliche. There's an annoying bad boy. This guy's called Dobby Roebuck, a self-styled pin-up for the girls at the high school. The treatment notes that Roebuck and his goons are making life difficult for class nerd Eric Arlott, who has a secret crush on a fellow schoolmate named Amber, and when Jodie sticks up for Eric, an altercation breaks out between the bullies and Vin, distracting Jodie from Tamsin, who sneaks into a car driven away by Gardner. Jodie sees this, wondering what that could possibly mean. This is all very too teenagery for my liking. I'm just going to throw it out there. Way too teenagery. Like, really, really, really. It sounds terrible. So, continues further and says, so I intentionally wanted to set up pretty much your standard horror movie characters. Yeah, real bad ones, Peter Briggs. These suck. There's a lot of familiar horror movie tropes in the setup of it. Anyway, this guy Gardner has a sort of flashback dream late one night. We see he's involved in quantum work and abstract geometry, that he worked previously at this sort of high-tech particle accelerator facility doing experiments on various different types of metals. So he's come here claiming to be a teacher and is acting as a teacher, but really he's got his own agenda. He had found a sample of this metal that doesn't fit on the atomic table. When he had bombarded this metal, he opened the dimensional gate and freed the Cenobites at this particle accelerator facility, and the whole research team was killed. What? I mean, you tell this is from the 90s or some crap like that. Well, 2002. This is proper. I do not like the sound of that. How overly complex and contrived. When the machinery's automatic shutdown timer sends the Cenobites back, Gardner's the only survivor. How? He was questioned by the police, but the cameras were knocked out and all this kind of thing. Anyway, he wakes up after having his nightmare and goes to the bathroom, and he has a vision of Pinhead in a wreath of swirling smoke watching him. Gardner leaves his house, leaving behind a chalkboard that we see is filled with dense equations that, at a distance, form the visual geometry of the Lament configuration. That's quite a nice touch. Now, Gardner drives out of Lament and to a ramshackle tin shack in the middle of nowhere. There's a fetish club revealed within, full of smoke and music. Gardner approaches his favourite dominatrix, a masked brunette, wises off and receives a vicious kick to the face that leaves his lip split. He smiles gratefully as he licks the cut. Briggs continues, so Jodie herself has a bad dream, culminating with crows battering her window while a deep voice asks her desires. Her father at this point, when he gets the diagrams, surprise surprise, the town's sewer system also seems to represent part of the Lament configuration from the boxes. It's basically, this whole town is the Lament configuration. Through a series of events, Vin comes across Gardner's discarded wallet and discovers from his license that he's really Richard Morgan from New Mexico. Vin reveals this to Jodie, who confides that she believes Gardner and Tamsin may be having an affair under the pretext of getting back the library books and returning his wallet. Jodie and Vin get access to Gardner's home. They rifle through his baffling schizophrenic notes, quantum physics diagrams, and a library of occult arcana concerning the puzzle boxes and Leviathan. It's here that they discover Delisle and the nature of Lament's past, and assume that the town's origins have been suppressed merely because of Delisle's Sadine history. And Jodie notices the Lament configuration pattern, realising that she's seen it elsewhere. Again, very contrived. And again, super kiddie. Later, Gardner returns to his house with his dominatrix, who spurs him on toward completing his equations with her painful little kinks. Gardner completes his work, discovering a brand new way to open the Lament configuration. Chains erupt from some fourth dimensional space within his chalkboard, flaying the man and flooding the room with his blood, which seeps through his floorboards and down into the town's sewer system. Not a bad scene, I can imagine that playing out quite nicely. An earthquake, this is where we go proper bombastic and nonsense. An earthquake rocks the town, causing mayhem and burning down Gardner's home, erasing all evidence of the man's work and grisly death. Meanwhile, we spend more time with the town's teens, because we really want to spend more time with teenagers, don't we? All of whom have their own personal demons which make them perfect targets for Pinhead, who coerces each into his machinations by playing on their hidden desires, manipulating them into solving their own pieces of the configuration. From the treatment, we experience various dream revelations of the victims, depicting Pinhead and the other Cenobites veiled in gauzy shrouds so that their identities aren't immediately apparent to their prey. The Cenobites offer whispered inducement, help them solve the puzzles, and their heart's desires will be unleashed. The Cenobites' plan works, with each of the Founding Fathers' descendants solving their own puzzles, meeting their doom as the boxes tear them apart, draining their blood into the ground and awaiting sewer system below. We see the literal walls of blood flowing through the sewers, the droplets focused and channeled through the Duke Delisle ancient infernal genius, all reaching an intersection beneath Gardner's burnt house and at the very centre of town. Oh, Jesus, guys, it gets worse. Having realised what's been happening, Jodie and Vin race to save Tamsin from a similar fate, only to discover the young woman transformed, energised, laughing with cruel abandon. Tamsin hadn't been preyed upon by Gardner, she'd been using him to aid in completing Pinhead's plan so that she might take her revenge on her abusive police chief father. Ridiculous side plot. She was the masked dominatrix from the Fetish Club. She has been acting as Pinhead's primary conduit on Earth, orchestrating the whole enterprise to release the demon. For goodness sake. Anyway, once every last configuration is solved, Delisle's resurrection configuration comes together. Originally designed to resurrect Delisle himself, the design ultimately opens the schism and releases Pinhead. Hell is unleashed upon Lament in numerous ways. Lines of fire explode towards the charred ashes and an unholy column of light bursts upwards. Yeah, guys, you remember all those movies that just had lights flaming into the sky? This is one of them. So ridiculous. A charred skeleton rises up from the ashes, flesh and clothing flowing over its form, a network of pins telescoping from its skull. Pinhead is reborn, and Tamsin is to reap her reward from her lord and prince. Jodie and Vin attempt to flee, only to be thwarted at every turn by Pinhead's newly created army of Cenobites. Just as all hope appears to be lost, here we go, ladies and gents, balls to the wall, Pinhead is stopped by a last-minute arrival, Angelique, the Princess of Hell. Angelique regards Jodie and Vin, telling them to leave. Their presence is not intended or wanted here. Pinhead and Angelique then square off, with the lead Cenobite taunting the princess with the knowledge that she cannot possibly stand against he and his legion of Cenobites. Better that she renounce her Lord Leviathan and join their new order. Angelique regards Pinhead with something approaching pity, as he has failed to understand the awesome power of the town's infernal hidden geometry. Another earthquake hits Lament. Massive triangular plates burst from the ground, thousands of feet across. The sidewalks around Pinhead erupt, and Leviathan's flesh tentacles whip out and attach their talon tips into each of the Cenobites' heads. Leviathan has arrived to take its unruly children home once more. Not bad. Again, balls to the wall though. Jodie and Vin make it to the edge of town, turning to see the massive triangles closing to an apex, revealing themselves to be the tip of Leviathan. The treatment ends with the terrifying bell chimes of hell. Leviathan sinks back into the earth, swallowing the town and taking it with it like it was never really there. And Briggs then, just comments on Hellraiser and the script and stuff. And he says, I remember at the time I went out and bought like everything I could get my hands on to do with Hellraiser. Briggs notes, explaining his process. I was reading the Wachowskis' Hellraiser comics and saw all of the movies I'd missed. I think if you look at the treatment, I wouldn't claim to be an expert in Hellraiser, but whenever somebody gives me a project I do try and find out everything I can on it so that I can take care of continuity. So it obviously fits within continuity, and it is a self-enclosed story in as much as it starts and ends and events happen within it. I don't really like it, I'm not going to lie. Now he said further, he says, I was sort of fascinated with Leviathan. I didn't really feel that Leviathan had gotten much screen time. I wanted to sort of delve into the mythology of it. We knew about Le Marchand and the construction of the boxes, but we never knew exactly what the boxes had come about. And I figured, okay, what is special about these? They're obviously not just boxes. I thought this rare metal would be the unobtainium of the universe, and it has that sort of Western feeling, a town called Lament. I liked the idea of this shard of Leviathan acting as the means for Leviathan coming about into the world. I don't hate that, but all the kids and stuff, Jesus. Now he says further, even though you look back on Hellraiser 2, the matte paintings are astonishingly crude now, but in terms of just drawing an image of something, that huge sort of rhombus floating geodesic thing is like stuffing the Stargate in 2001 into this mythology, and I kind of wanted to see this big thing floating over a town, having kind of ripped its way through it, just having the big crazy ending. So why didn't this thing make it past the treatment? He says, if you remember, those Hellraiser movies were painfully bargain basement. The ones that they were doing at Dimension, they had like almost no budget, and if you see the end of this, it's this wall with the Cenobites and Leviathan cracks open in the center of town and rises up. The whole of the town winds up being swallowed into a sinkhole and vanishing, so it was probably a bit more expensive than the, shall we say, budget-conscious Dimension wanted to spend on it. So basically, it was money. But it was also not very good. He says further, that was that. Basically, it never happened. It never went beyond that treatment. I don't like doing treatments or outlines anyway. To sort of sit down and put that story together doesn't take you on that journey of discovery as a writer and let the characters evolve and take you in the heat of the moment to places you can't coldly, logically fabricate. At the end of the day, I don't know. This is a long video. What do you guys think? I'm not a fan. Jasper's not a fan either. He's bored to death. I've read a lot of Hellraiser scripts in my time. As a treatment, it's way too out there, way too many like teenager focus in this as well. Way too much. Like teenagers, piss off, no one cares. No one wants teenagers in a Hellraiser movie. The closest we got to it was Kirsty. That's the closest people are happy with it anyway. But let me know what you think down below. If you're new here, do hit subscribe. You stayed this long, you clearly enjoyed the video. Thanks so much. Take care.